Cool. So hi, my name's James. I'm from a company called Impala, and yes, as Pavel mentioned, it's been a challenging time for the travel sector, for the hospitality and travel sector. So yeah, so it's been an interesting few months for us. So what is Impala? What do we do? So I've been here for about a bit over 2 years now, and I started off as a software engineer at Impala, and like the other startup I worked at before, I've done a sort of mix of platform engineering and software stuff, and so it's it's a different world doing platform stuff, I think, and really luckily I've been able to do a combination of that and then move directly into doing platform stuff full time. So if you have any questions about that sort of journey and that kind of side of things, then pop me a message on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to talk about that all the time. All day long, even. So when I first heard about Impala, I had this kind of question. I was like, why do you need to build an API for travel? And one thing that really resonated with me from Moff's talk is the kind of world of open banking and that sort of access to data. And so I assumed that in many ways, the developer experience for a lot of industries or a lot of systems is really great these days. There's an API for everything. You know, if you want weather data, you want a map for something, look up an address somewhere, there's an API that exists for it. And so when I heard about Impala initially, I was like, well, why does Impala exist then? Do we like some kind of API gateway? You know, very, very similar to things we've just heard talked about. And moving things to a little bit of a different industry or different world, if you think about how easy is it to take payments online, it normally looks something like this. And apologies if your favorite language isn't featured. And really, businesses like Stripe have made an incredible developer experience for a very, very complicated world, like all the world of dealing with the actual issuing banks, the credit card processing, different credit card providers, that sort of stuff. It's a huge, huge load of complexity that sits there behind the scenes, but the experience for us as developers is super, super nice. And it's like, how long does it take to set something like that up? You know, maybe, I don't know, if you're running at hackathon speed, probably a few hours, or very early stage startup speed, I should say. For a more experienced company, you're probably looking at a few days maybe to get the SDK in, set up an account, read through the docs, that sort of stuff. And it's really that easy. There's no horrible payment gateways that look like they're from the 90s. You don't have to install any hardware, and it's just really cheap and fast and easy to do. And so I thought, well, surely this is the case for travel stuff. And so it's like, well, how easy is it to build products that use hotel data, or maybe to sell stays at hotel, to sell bookings, or even something that seems very simple, like choosing a room when you book a hotel. And it turns out that a lot of that stuff is actually very difficult. And it's like, why is it so difficult? Why can you do this in many worlds, many industries, but you can't do it in the travel hospitality space? And the sort of reasoning behind that is that if you think about when you're booking a room for a hotel stay somewhere, for example, your experience as the person staying there might be very simple. It might just be logging onto the booking website, choosing a room, choosing the dates, whatever, and sorting it. But actually, how we arrive at, from the top of the diagram, the systems that are often running on premise at the hotel, through layers of complexity and layers of systems to you as the end user, really means that it's super, super hard to get that data. And there are some standards reminiscent of the sort of open banking world in this space, but they're definitely not incredibly well adopted. And many of these systems that hold all the really important data for those hotels are on premise. They don't change very often. You know, these are manual upgrades that are done by solutions engineers, once a year or once every 6 months. And it's not like there are 2 or 3 big players in this market that you can integrate with really easily. And you start to hear things like this. It's like, okay, well, yeah, we can add this connectivity in, but yeah, the project probably takes 6 months to implement. It's €500 a month for the connectivity. You've got to have a lot of face time with people like solutions engineers getting involved with it, support teams, and have a really, really long and slow implementation process. And the real kicker, something that seems kind of crazy these days, is that actually to get connectivity with these systems and to get access to this data, they've got to install more hardware on site because many of these systems are on premise. And if could you imagine turning up to a pitch meeting for a product with a hotel and saying, well, we've got this really great product that we'd like to use. And they say, okay, how do you connect it to our system? And they say, well, it'll take 6 months. It'll cost you €500 a month to run. And you've got to install a new server. It just, these days seems mad when there are so many SaaS products and so much of what we do and build is online. And the really frustrating thing, which is a killer in many scenarios, is that oftentimes you've got a great product idea for something you want to build for the travel world or for hospitality world, and you just can't do it because you just can't get the data you need to actually build that. And it's really not this experience. And so as a developer, for me, that was really exciting. It's like, wow, can we come into this space? Can we come into this world and make it this easy? Can we effectively power products that without us couldn't exist? And in the same way that at the moment, you could easily say, well, can you imagine having to do payments without Stripe? What I really want is that in a few years, you'll be able to say, well, can you imagine travel without Impala in the same sort of vein? So what have we actually been up to recently? So other than looking marvelous in some racing outfits, normally, because our developers have always been remote, we do a quarterly co-location week. So we all go to the same city in the UK normally. And we do various events and team building things and all that sort of stuff. But this year, obviously, is a little bit different. And so we've done a remote one instead, a remote location, as I'm told to call it. And part of that sort of remote location event is that we do a hackathon. And the hackathon is a really great way for us to try out some of our own products, do a bit of dog fooding, as it were, and also to try some experimental concepts that we maybe want to try as new things that could enrich the product from what we got already. So, for example, we had one team that was looking at reviews for hotels, and they said, well, if you take reviews for hotels as a data set, you do some natural language processing on them, can you then enrich the data that we provide as part of our products, perhaps by knowing certain things, being at a hotel, like does it have valet parking? Is it child friendly? That sort of stuff. And one thing that I referenced very briefly earlier, which is kind of like a big thing, is room selection. So if you imagine when you book a flight somewhere, there's always the option to choose your seat, and you pay a different amount of money based on where the seat is. And you might think, well, why on earth can't we have the same sort of thing for a hotel? Like, why can't I choose the one with a corner view, maybe pay a little bit more, or why can't I pay a little bit extra for the one that gets the sun in the morning? And if you think back to that diagram of all the layers of complexity between the sort of hotel systems that don't necessarily have APIs even, and you as the developer building products for that world, there's huge layers of stuff in the middle. And at each stage you lose data, and at each stage you lose the frequency of updates to that and the freshness. And so actually being able to go onto the standard hotel booking website you might use normally and to see a room plan with what's available is pretty much impossible. And it seems crazy that you can't do this. And so one of our teams recently was looking at combining the data from two APIs that we have, one to do with distribution, to do with selling rooms and selling bookings effectively. And the other one looking that's deeply integrated with these hotel systems, with the property management systems, and saying, well, could you combine the data from these two APIs that we've built to manage this experience, to make something where you could actually book a room, which from the outset seems really simple. Seems like something you should be able to do mega easily. But actually, because of the complexity that exists in the industry, it's something that's really very hard. And we've got stuff like this. We had people talking about different models for consistency in databases, that sort of stuff. And really, I love the co-location weeks and miss deeply going and meeting people in person and actually doing these activities together. But yeah, it's a really nice way to look at the APIs and products that we build, look at that complex travel space that is, let's say, developer phobic, and try and make that easier to digest and easier to use, and hopefully power some really cool and interesting products that could make good use of that data. So yeah, so hopefully that was a little introduction into our world. Feel free to reach out either in the chat here or on LinkedIn for anything. And as the people will mention, you can find us on the Tech Tree website